Whatever you're
Who's
ready.
missing? Uchi?
Uchi and Katie are missing. Katie, I know
Katie-
was not going to
Yeah,
attend,
I don't know about Uchi, I didn't hear from him.
I texted her earlier about something else, didn't hear from her.
but we do have quorum, so
Okay,
we can roll as needed.
okay, I'm good. Is it on?
Yep, we're ready. to go.
Okay, we'll call to order the planning commission meeting for Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. Roll call.
It's 6:02. Chuck Howard,
Yeah, present.
Kent Slingmaker,
Present.
Katie Maxwell, Jefferson Litch,
Present.
Vice Chair Ursula Kruzalek, Chair Cindy Oak.
Here.
Thank you.
Next item is approval of the agenda, and we do have to amend the agenda. We're deleting the item A, the Mighty Argo cable car. So we need a motion to amend the agenda.
Motion to amend the agenda to remove item A of the work session. I'll second.
All those in favor, yay?
Yeah.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, approval of the minutes from December 11th, 2024. Make a note that
I did.
Richie hasn't
Got it, thank you.
So approval of the minutes for December 11th, 2024. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes from 2024.
Second.
I'll second that.
Any discussion, corrections? All those in favor say yay.
Yeah.
Opposed, motion carries. Great. Okay, any notice of conflict of interest on the agenda items? No conflict of interest, okay? Public comment, this is on non-agenda items for anybody that's in the audience or calls in. We have a sign-up sheet. I don't think I saw anybody. It's where somebody wants to address the commission on something that's not an agenda item. They would have a moment to make comment.
There's no one online.
Nobody has signed in.
Okay.
No comment? Okay. Staff update.
Sure, so I put one item on the agenda just to really highlight it, but I wanted to update you on a few things. So I'll just start with these other items and then hop into the Soda Creek Highlands subdivision improvements agreement update. Just want to make a note that we're currently recruiting for members. There's one open alternate seat. I don't think we've gotten any letters of interest, but council will be attempting to fill positions at the second meeting in February, which would be the 4th. If you know of anyone or if anyone's listening and wants to be an alternate to planning commission, get that to Wonder here. And that also lends to the second update, which is that chair and vice chair have to be appointed in March. So obviously we can just keep it as is, but we'll have to make that appointment in March per code. The next thing I was going to mention was about a new and continuing commissioner training that we want to put on just to kind of update new members, kind of refresh old members for all boards and commissions on like how things work. Tentatively, we were talking about potentially doing that during like work session for planning commission next month. So the March 5th meeting, that's not set in stone quite yet, I don't think, but that would be perhaps a good way of refreshing on procedures and practices and all that. I don't know, like Jefferson, I think you're the only one who hasn't been on since the last training was done, but could be, helpful for that. But it's a good refresher for everyone, and that would also be our sites and facilities and our HPRC and our variance.
So do all of them together at that work session?
I think that's the idea. Obviously, there's some unique aspects to each commission and board and committee, but a lot of things are the same regardless. And so if there were any particular items that should be kind of specific to HPRC, for example, we wouldn't want to just force, you or variance board or whoever to listen to things about historic preservation unless you're interested in that. So it would be kind of just a broad training, answer questions, get people refreshed. If we have any new members, after the February 24th meeting, it's a perfect time to get them up to speed quick. The last thing I'll mention, which is probably also March kickoff, might be starting the update to the comprehensive plan. It was last approved in 2017. Few of you were a part of that and are listed in the dedications there. But yeah, it's been nearly 8 years now and we budgeted for it. And I'm just working on some things on the back end, but I think by this time next month, we'll be ready to kick it off. And I think planning commission is the perfect place to kick it off because between me and the 6 of you will be pretty critical to that effort, I think.
So you're doing the rewrite on it.
That I think is what I will propose because looking back at the history of it in 2017, it was done in-house with Alan Diefenbach, who was the plan at the time. Maria, our best advice fellow, and I have been kind of working on auditing the existing comp plan to say like, well, here's all the goals that have already been accomplished. Here's ones that are outstanding. Should they still be in our update, and what are things that are like ongoing things that are just going to continue to be planned forever to get that starting baseline of how much has changed, how much we have accomplished, what's needed. So I think because we already have this pretty good framework from the 2017 plan that we can kind of do it in-house, and it'll be a lift, of course, but I think with Maria, that will be really helpful to have her, and she's here through the mid-October, so that's, quite a capable set of hands to help with this first bit of the process. So more to come on that, but it's just kind of a teaser to get everyone excited.
Well, I think it's great we can do it in-house instead of outsourcing it. Means we have the right people hired to do the positions that do that. So
Right, and
that's good.
I think there will be certain elements that will have to be done by a professional, if there's like particular graphics and things like that that require specialized software and all that, that's why we have a budget for it, but budget currently is $50,000 and that's certainly not enough to have some other team write the entire thing. And you think that's a ton of money, but I was looking at another comp plan that is almost finalized in Summit County and they're at like, don't quote me on this, but it's like 150 to 200,000 to have it being done by a consultant. And we have like I said, they hadn't updated theirs in a long time and they were kind of combining 5 plans in one. Ours is already, I think, quite good from reviewing it and auditing it. So anyway, it'll be work, but I think it's doable, but more to come on the internal side, and then I think we'll be ready next month. And so then the last update, which I had on the schedule, is to talk about an item that would be on the agenda for the next Monday's council meeting. It's a subdivision improvements agreement for Soda Islands. And so anyway, I want to go into the history a little bit just to say why there's not a planning commission action on this particular item, but to also keep everyone informed so that as it continues going forward, potentially there aren't like surprises of constituents coming and being like, what's going on? Why weren't you part of this, etc. So anyway, Soda Creek Islands development was approved quite a long time ago as a single family home project. It was 2004 that a final plat for 45 single family lots were approved up. And actually I might share my screen just so that it shows kind of where we're talking about. Just a second, but ones. All right, So I'm just gonna share that, you probably can't quite see it from over there, but just in case anyone's online. Or whatever. So there was this plat back in 2004. It was for these 45 homes. I'm not gonna be able to get big enough really to show any detail. It's, for the sake of reference, here's Pine Slope Road. Here's Soda Creek Road, and it's kind of on the hill just west and up from that. This probably is familiar because a couple of years ago, the current owners of this property, this whole larger parcel here, with this exception excluded, had attempted to upzone the parcel to something like 264 units of density. That came and was recommended for denial at planning commission. Obviously was not approved by city council. And so that 264 unit development was not approved. And so, that, but because they had this final plat, which was approved back in 2004, that's for these 45 housing units. And that has never, that was recorded, it went through the whole process, was approved, et cetera. So it's just kind of sat underlying for the past 20 years because it was recorded in 2006. And so it's been quite dormant. They haven't really done anything with it. It changed hands. And now the current owners have come to us and said, we're ready to move forward with this. What do we have to do? This has been about a year in the making to get to this point since they first re-engaged us. And so where they are is they have to get a subdivision improvements agreement approved. That subdivision improvements agreement is part of the subdivision process, but is separate. Because the subdivision itself was already approved, it doesn't have to go back through planning commission, and subdivision improvements agreement only has to be approved by council. Which is why I'm just updating you now as opposed to having action on it. So what the subdivision improvements agreement does is it establishes what public improvements have to be built. Things like road infrastructure and streets, utility infrastructure, drainage and stormwater retention, that kind of stuff. All the public improvements that are required for a subdivision to be built. It also includes an estimated cost for those improvements, and we bond that. Once that's accepted, we take a letter of credit or a bonded financial guarantee for 120 to 125%. 125% is what's proposed in this case, so that if they default on the payments, or they default on building the improvements, we have the money where if we want to finish or need to finish the improvements, we can do so. So at this point, they've submitted preliminary plans so that they could create that estimate and then come up with the agreement that speaks to all of the things that need to be done. At this stage, their plans are, I would say, are not complete final civil plans. What they really are lacking is stormwater and drainage improvements. So that just to ensure that water isn't going to flow to, folks who live in Pine Slope or cause flooding of Pine Slope Road or cause flooding of Soda Creek Road or any of that, because that's obviously a big concern. It also approves potential deviations from subdivision regulations. For example, if you maybe had a requirement for, the requirement says you have to do 50-foot right of way, and maybe you allow 40-foot right of way or something. That's a bad example because the right of way is flat, but still. So anyway, at this point, council will be reviewing that document on Monday. We're having it as a work session item to kind of talk to any questions they have, any concerns, et cetera. Have the developer in to talk, and also see what's missing. And so if it gets approved, which it may or may not, if it doesn't get approved, then there's probably some issues that need to be addressed, and then we would say, hey guys, you have to address those issues, and then you can bring it back to council to re-review it. If it gets approved, then the next step would be for them to finalize their civil plans, get those approved by engineering and public works, myself, and then get essentially like earth disturbance permits and the like to construct all the improvements that are needed, the roads and the sewers and the water lines and all of that. So anyway, that's kind of a very, not a super brief, but a brief of what is going to council on Monday, and if approved, what we could see in 2025 starting to happen on that inside. And I think even though you don't have like an action item tonight, if there are any comments or questions or things like that, I'm happy to answer those now, or I would say otherwise encourage everyone to listen in on Monday. And
I have a couple questions. So did the property change hands again?
not since it was proposed for the upzoning. So it's the
Okay.
same, Soda Creek Island, it's run by, or owned, I guess, in part by the,
So it's-
Kevin O'Malley.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I hate to say it, this is how long I've been doing this. I was part of the original whole thing of this, which I thought at the time, we did a very good job on it, actually, and the city and everybody involved in it. I was surprised reading through it, how recalling it and how detailed it is, which is great. And what changes they're asking for so far that I saw is pretty minimal.
Sure, and some of those changes were already considered back when.
And we were really tough when this really came along because they're, the grades and all the different things. I
Right.
remember this was a lot of years working on this with
Right. And
them at the time.
And, it's important to
It was
note.
bristle cones.
Yeah, bristlecone at the time, yeah, so, I think a lot of that still stands. Obviously, they've made some minor changes that are up for review as well from that time, because it's a different developer, different engineers, et cetera, but all of the things that were worked on back 20
I know.
plus years
That's
ago
scary.
are still there, so.
One of the things I would think that the city might look at, and it was something we did at the time too, is the impact fees. Because at the time, the impact fees were very low, and then the city changed the impact fees. And I don't know when's the last time the city looked at the value of impact fees, if they should be increased. I think, did I read somewhere it's at 5,000?
Yeah, the current. fee
Which to
schedule-
me, it sounds pretty low in today's world, but it's just a suggestion that
Right.
they should look at.
Yeah, the current impact fees is at 5,000 per single family lot per our most recently adopted fee schedule, so. So yeah, you're right. It could-
Yeah, I don't know when's the last time the city looked at, I bet it was a long time ago. Were you here? Probably not. Yeah.
We periodically look at our fee schedule.
Mhm.
Impact fees haven't changed recently. No, the 5,000 per unit sitting that was used at the, Four Points development.
Okay.
Football field.
So you guys did look at them then?
Yeah.
Okay, that was the only things I noticed.
And one thing I forgot to mention was, or I kind of mentioned it, but just to reiterate, would be that even like, it's just preliminary plans for civil at this point to get to that cost estimate. We, as the city, have written the agreement such that they could not move a single, rock until final civil plans meeting all requirements are approved, at least by staff. So that's part of the agreement as well, which hopefully will protect against anything being overlooked, I guess, if it was approved with this preliminary set. So I think that's it from me on that one, but like I said, happy to chat more.
Interesting. But it's coming back. Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a question. I don't know when I can ask.
Yeah, we're open to answer. It sounds like the decision making will be at the council meeting, at the work session on Monday. It's a work session. They're not approving it yet?
Well, it's scheduled as a work session to kind of discuss everything, answer questions and really dig into it, but if the council were comfortable moving forward, it'll be on the regular meeting agenda, but if council says, or council or the developer says we're not ready to go forward with this, then we can just amend the agenda easily.
So that's when I would say you come with your
Right,
questions.
it may be
for that.
more of a statement of something that I'm seeing that no one else has seen as far as constructing the development.
Okay, go ahead.
As one to identify yourself.
I'm Edward Sigward, 105 27th Place. I'm also water facility superintendent for City of Idaho.
But you're making your comment tonight as a citizen, not.
As a citizen, yes. Well, and knowledge of the water system. When I looked at this, many of the properties that are up high are higher in elevation than even like our green tank is. And most of them are higher than even the soda hill tank. So any of the houses that were built there, water would need to be pumped to them. We also, so it's similar to say like Montaigne subdivision. We just recently rebuilt their tank and had to meet and met fire flow requirements for Montaigne with that tank. That was based on housing size, how big the houses were. They had us do 1,000 gallons a minute for 60 minutes. So we built a 75,000 gallon tank at the top of that mountain to provide that fire flow and that water to the Montaigne part of town. And I didn't see any of that in their plan at all.
Okay, I would say the work sessions, when they have open comment and stuff, get your input at that time. Or contact Dylan as far as something he can bring up when they're looking at that stuff.
You'll be at work session on Monday, I
Yeah.
presume, Ed, so I think that's really important to bring up.
Good, that's a good point.
Thank you. Okay, anybody have any questions on that for Dylan, the procedure on how they're doing it? Okay, so the next agenda item is a public hearing on the recommendation for annexation and zoning of city parcel at 839 Colorado 103. This matter is set for a public hearing before the City of Idaho Springs Planning Commission tonight. As a property owner, the city has applied to annex and zone the property known as 839 Colorado 103. For this application, the Planning Commission will conduct a hearing and vote to either recommend approval or disapproval of the annexation and zoning. This is a formal public hearing. We will require testimony to be given under oath. We will not follow any formal rules of evidence. If there is a question about the admissibility of evidence or testimony, I'll make a ruling on that as chair. After I open the hearing, I'll invite the city staff to give a presentation regarding the contents of the application. Then members of the public will be invited to give evidence and testimony. City staff may respond to the public testimony throughout this process. Commissioners may ask questions. After I close the hearing, the public hearing, the commission will begin its deliberation and make our decision. We will do this by motion. A suggested motion is in the staff report and in our motions guidelines. If we cannot reach a decision tonight, we could also continue the matter. Before I open the hearing, any questions about the process? Okay, I now open the public hearing on the recommendation of annexation and zoning of city parcel at 839 Colorado 103 at 6:25 p.m. And we'll start with city staff.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'll just share for anyone who's watching online or whatever, a bit of a vicinity map and a zoning map. So this parcel is about 1.99 acres. It's currently outside city limits. Recently, or the payment to acquire this property was just made in January, so now the city owns this property. The city purchased this property from the current owner for, I guess, a particular reason, and that reason being to construct at some point in the future senior housing on this property. We're working on it's kind of out of the bounds of the annexation zoning, but just for some background, we're working on a agreement to basically dedicate that use as a kind of the use that will go forward on that property. And so it's kind of an exciting development potentially for the future because it can get, we've had some initial design work done from a design firm, and they think that meeting code, you could fit 60 some units at at kind of a higher density. And that might not actually happen, but we could see quite a significant provision of senior housing on that site that will fill a pretty serious need in the community. So given that we've purchased the property for that purpose, or just purchase in general, the next step is to annex it into the city and then zone it. The annexation is relatively straightforward in this case because the city owns the property, so you kind of just do it via simple ordinance rather than do a full annexation process that requires like 4 weeks of public notice and multiple hearings and all of that stuff. So that annexation side of things is pretty straightforward. And so I'll focus more on the zoning. As far as the annexation is concerned, I will say there is compliance with the comprehensive plan and the 3 mile plan, which both state a need for this area to be considered mixed residential density and transitional mixed use for what's in our city limits. It also, our 3 mile plan talks about the need for, and the comprehensive plan also about the need for senior housing and also affordable housing, which ultimately the goal for this site is to provide both of those things. Affordable senior housing. So, given that, we definitely believe that annexation criteria are met. With respect to zoning, I also believe they're all met, but I'll just go into it a little bit more. The key, question, really comes down to our desired use for the property, but also kind of adjacent uses for the property. So right now in the county, it's zoned for single family. And so by taking it into city limits and then zoning it as R3 is what we're proposing. R3 allows for single family, duplex, multifamily uses. So it would allow for multifamily at kind of whatever density is appropriate. At the moment, the adjacent surrounding uses in the immediate vicinity of this site are mostly single family homes. They're in the county, they're not in city limits. You can see on this map on the screen, everything that's in city limits in this general vicinity on 103 south of exit 240 is already R3 or C1, both of which allow multifamily, both of which allow higher density uses. Northern, the C1 would allow commercial uses as well, although at the moment it's just Carlson Elementary School. So staff considered, what would be the concern? Would there be issues bringing if it were zoned R3 and multifamily would be permitted, given that there are some single family homes, some commercial businesses, some community uses, et cetera. And we ultimately think that it does meet it would be appropriate in this case and it can be in harmony and compatible with surrounding land uses because Highway 103 with a relatively high capacity road, but doesn't get an incredible amount of traffic. There are all necessary infrastructure for multifamily is already there with water lines, sewer lines, and the like. And it's a relatively easy, journey into the city from this site to kind of support higher density uses in the future. So I guess in that case, that would allow that D of the criteria is met. B, whether material changes in character of the neighborhood justify the zoning change. I guess one of the big material changes is that this parcel is going to be annexed into the city. The other thing is that we now do have some more traffic in the area already and some redevelopment with the new Carlson Elementary School there at the site of the old high school. The other thought was about the proposed, whether it preserves and promotes property values. Staff believes that it will preserve property values, although it's could allow for higher density than the immediate surrounding county zone districts. If you take the kind of that half mile or so corridor as a whole, it definitely supports that mix of multifamily, single family, some commercial uses, some public uses. The last consideration that is worth considering is about whether the rezoning would affect traffic congestion. Thinking, obviously going from single family home to like 50 or 60 units would have more traffic. However, an analysis of Highway 103 would suggest that it can support additional vehicle travel. Also, obviously, zoning doesn't know what's going to go there, but given that what the property was purchased for, senior housing typically has lower levels of car travel associated with those units. And so even considering 60 units, it's probably less impactful than 60 units of market rate housing. So given all of that, I believe, and referral agencies believe, that this rezoning to R3 meets the requirements of the zoning application, and as such, I recommend that you all recommend approval of the annexation and zoning of the parcel to R3 multifamily. And I guess that's it from me.
Okay, the next item is invite public comment. Do we have anybody for public comment? Did you guys sign in? Are you here for this item? No?
I don't have anyone online, so it does not appear that public comment.
No idea.
Okay, no public comment? Okay, what? Do we have any questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, since I'll go ahead. So yeah, definitely the concern about traffic on that road. We've all been down there, especially during the summertime and spring as well. Is there potential for putting a stipulation on development of that property that there might be, if the survey says it would support it, like a turn off type thing or situation, a widening of the road? I can just imagine, so you're going south and you want to turn into the property, and he said like 50 to 60 units, and now there's a line of cars backed up all the way to the highway. There's so much traffic coming north from Mount Blue Sky. I can just see it causing traffic and potential for increased opportunity for accidents as well. So I wasn't sure if there, what this space is there. I can't envision it right now, but I don't know how much potential for widening there is there.
Well,
And if that's something that needs to be considered.
I think from the perspective of whether space exists, I'm guessing it does. I'm just quickly trying to.
I don't know what the easement is for the highway.
Wouldn't it depend on the development, that they might have to do a traffic impact study?
Yeah,
is where it might turn.
Yeah, so that would be, it's not necessary, like it wouldn't be with that sort of traffic analysis or traffic impact study would not be required for zoning, of course, but
Right.
that is one of the required submittal items for a final development plan. And so I believe in the past, there have been times when that's been waived, but in this case, like you mentioned, I think it would be important to ensure that that is done, to make sure that if there's improvements needed, that those are done.
Right, so right now,
and-
we're just doing the approval of the annexation.
And I think it would be in our scope if maybe it wouldn't be necessary since it's kind of a required element of a final development plan typically, but I would guess we could recommend a condition or something saying that traffic studies be performed prior to approval of construction on the property or something like that. The right of way in this section is about 80 feet. So there is space. It's CDOT right of way.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would think that right now doesn't have anything to do with the zoning and but that if something is to come forward, I mean, like you said, if it tends to be, which it sounds like it's leaning in the direction of senior housing, that's where that would be a request. Would
Yeah.
this come back to us?
Yes,
Okay,
it would
so
be
that would be
required
the
to have.
Yeah.
So it's like, it
Before we develop anything on the property, it'll have to go through a final development plan process, which
Okay.
requires planning commission and council.
Okay.
That is a good question, because I think that's probably the key element. If there were a concern, that would be the concern, depending on what density were ultimately proposed.
Yeah, just as cautionary approach to zoning as R3 during the annexation process here is that would come up, is that we would now have to look at a traffic study and take that into consideration. So that was only a risk saying yes, R3 is.
Okay, any other questions?
That is a state highway, and CDOT will also require an access permit, and that will need to be reviewed. We went through this with the event center farther down the road,
Yep.
where CDOT had to review and actually make any recommendations to changes to the highway
Yep.
and the access. So that is something that will be part of the process.
what does access permit mean?
Means CDOT controls their highway, and they have the say about whether any additional access points are allowed. Now, of
Right.
course, there's already an access point there now for a single family home.
Mhm.
But, when you're talking potentially much larger density there, that would need to be reviewed and approved by CDOT.
Right on, thanks.
Any other questions?
It's not exactly a question, but and it's not exactly for zoning, but I would like to mention this since this is will be a city project, right? I would like to put a bug on you guys. I don't know if you heard about intergenerational housing. And if I may, I would like to read the description. It aims to create a residential environment where older adults and younger residents live in close proximity, fostering social interaction, mutual support, and a sense of community through shared amenities and planned programming, potentially reducing isolation for seniors while providing younger residents with valuable life experiences and mentorship opportunities. I think it will be interesting if you guys were to look into that, if that's an option for that area as well. That's that.
The sale of the property by this property owner to the city was does have a deed restriction that it be for senior affordable housing. So there is that consideration, whether that could accommodate intergenerational housing. I'm not sure about that, but the property owner's intent in selling to the city was that it fill a affordable senior housing need. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not saying
absolutely.
it couldn't happen as intergenerational too.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully.
But that
we
is a
can do
big
that.
consideration, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing on the recommendation of annexation and zoning at 6:40 PM. Now commissioners need to deliberate and a motion. And there was a motion on page 5 of your packet.
Make a motion to recommend that city council annex the parcel and zone the parcel to R3.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Discussion? Any other discussion? No, with that, roll call.
Chuck Howard,
Yes.
Kent Slaymaker,
Yes.
Jefferson Lynch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ursula Kruzalek.
Yeah.
Chair Cindy Olsen.
Yes. Okay, motion carries. And now it goes to the city.
Yep, so that'll go to city council now. We're going to do first read of the ordinances on the 10th. So that means the public hearing with council for the zoning will probably be March 10th.
Okay, with that, we've done all agenda items and we'll go into a work session. So we'll adjourn the regular meeting, 6:41 PM.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
Oh,
Sweet,
Yeah.
I'll see you Monday.
See you.
the calendar. I never use that thing. Okay, and now we'll go to the work session, which is the housing discussion that was inter. Okay, can I ask you ladies, which items are you here for?
We're here just to watch what was gonna happen with Soda Creek.
Okay, so it sounds like the council meetings and the work sessions, right?
Yeah, I think definitely that'll be the one to much more.
We'll just sit here and glower and make you.
Happy to have you, of course.
Right.
Yeah, well, you two were definitely very intimidating, I think. When you came in, I definitely got a little more nervous. But
I kept looking at him like, am I doing something wrong?
I just have one question. Do all of you have a copy of the booklet, well, the book, Better, Not Bigger?
Not bad, no.
Check
I thought you were gonna ask Robert's rules.
I don't follow.
Cause I have that book.
I will get you each a copy of that.
Oh, yeah.
Bigger, what is it?
Better, not bigger.
Better, not bigger.
Better, not bigger.
Yeah,
it is
better,
good
not
reading.
bigger.
I have a copy. I could share it.
Oh, sweet. I love it.
So
Loved it.
I'll make a note to bring it in and leave it in my office next time I see you.
Okay,
All right, so Cindy, would you like me to kick off this work session item?
sure.
So this work session item is kind of very specific because the one thing we heard at the last work session and also as we were working on extended stay housing regulations was about this kind of but other kind of housing that doesn't really fit very neatly into, doesn't technically perhaps meet the definition of a dwelling unit for our code. It also doesn't meet the definition of something that is covered under extended stay lodging ordinance that was recently passed. And the reason for that might be many things. I think the reason this came up first was because there are, as everyone knows, there's some structures in town that were originally built for short-term housing, but over time kind of just naturally phased out of being hotels or motels or whatever, and now are really these like micro apartment sort of things, but they maybe don't contain all of the elements necessary to be considered a full dwelling unit, either because of the size or because of what's involved in these units. But there's also other types of housing, like, I don't know, dormitory style housing or things like that, that don't fit those definitions either. And so Nick and I largely considered, well, first and foremost, how would we define this type of housing that's not one or the other? And there's probably perhaps a few definitions, but low-hanging fruit would be our existing definition for dwelling efficiency units. And pulling that up on the screen, it would be a dwelling unit containing not more than one room or enclosed floor space arranged for living, eating, and sleeping purposes, not including bathrooms, water closets, laundry rooms, pantries, foyers, hallways, and other accessory floor spaces. Efficiency unit, also known as a studio type dwelling unit. So this is an existing definition in our code. However, it's not permitted anywhere in our code. And so as a use by right. And so although it's defined, and you could say, all right, if we have this efficiency unit definition, should it be defined? And so what Nick did was he drafted an ordinance, which is included in the staff report to address this particular issue first and foremost. And so what we thought we could, or what this ordinance would propose is that this efficiency unit would be permitted in areas where multiple family dwellings are already permitted. So that'd be R3, RM for rural multifamily, C1 and C2. And so this wouldn't necessarily get at all the topics that we probably need to ultimately dig into, but it would, for units that can meet this definition but can't meet the definition of dwelling unit, it would then allow those units going forward to be able to meet get approved. And so the caveat with that, of course, and I mentioned this in the report, is we do have in our minimum gross floor area by zone district table for R3 and RM, multifamily efficiency unit studio with a minimum gross square footage of 400 square feet. So if someone wanted to do it in the future, at the moment, they would have to create units out of 400 square feet. They couldn't create an 150 square foot unit. They couldn't create something like that. So if we had like an existing hotel that wanted to switch to being an efficiency unit, they could do so if this was used by right, but their units would have to be 400 square feet. So anyway, this is all it's a pretty focused item. I think we can, and I mentioned also we could expand it to talk about things like dormitories, things like co-ops or single room occupancy, or all these other housing types that maybe we want to encourage in the future. That wouldn't be included in this. Maybe it needs to be before we want to move forward. Maybe this isn't appropriate at all, but we wanted to take this for your consideration, get thoughts and comments and before we move any forward further on addressing items.
Well, I like that it's a small change that could be moved forward without too much other stuff. And well, I think all the other items you mentioned, the other types of housing, the square footage, that's all important. I don't think it should block just adding this definition to some zones. I think it's like, do this, get the win and move on to the next thing.
That was our thinking.
Yeah, Brown.
I like the description and stuff. You're not gonna get the hotel motel that's doing the extended stay get confused considering that they're thinking they're this.
Yeah.
Okay, and then this is to address the properties that fell in between the cracks that isn't one or the other, more or less.
I wouldn't say it addresses those properties. It addresses in the future what happens so that something doesn't fall through the cracks like last time.
Well, I do know of a few studio apartments kind of in town and a few empty spaces that would be great studio apartments, but it's not legal.
I think you also could do something like this in an existing home that, for example, we have a number of homes. I don't have I could share a zoning map, but just as I'll just do it for fun. But we have in our code or in our zone district, let's say, for example, this whole area on the center surrounding the historic district, kind of going east all the way to the visitor center. That is zone C1. A lot of those are single family residences at the moment. Let's say one of those owners said, I want to break this up into 4 studios that are each 400 square feet, and I'll provide things that are needed to create these efficiency units. This would allow them to do efficiency units as opposed to parceling it out into, I guess, full like multifamily dwelling units or what have you. So that would be a potential, even without building a new unit, it would allow potentially people to provide higher densities of housing, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be an accessory dwelling unit. It's in the existing, that's what I was thinking.
What's the main difference that an ADU is freestanding, I suppose, or what's the main difference, I suppose?
Well, an ADU doesn't necessarily have to be freestanding. You could build it into your existing home. The big difference is that an ADU is to allow you to build an accessory structure, dwelling structure on your basically on your existing single family home, and you can rent it out separately, or you can use it as guest quarters or something like that. It can't be a short-term rental, but, like anyone who has a single family home, you could just separate it out into an accessory unit that's 50% or less of your home. So you're not creating really multifamily, you just have this extra kind of bonus unit that you have on your lot.
And one of the questions I had was just on the zones to put it in. There's already a few studios in the historic district, and that's also where the spaces are, some of the spaces are, I'm thinking of. They're more mixed use than multifamily, because they're like above or behind shops. But it would be a decent way to bring some apartments that aren't technically legal into legality, perhaps.
So I was kind of wondering about leaving that out of the historic district.
Anything existing, if you were to change it, it would just be like an existing use,
Yeah.
This is really more towards, future projects.
Well, there's open, I mean, there's spaces that would be great studio apartments.
That- I think
So I don't
that is
know.
an interesting point, because right now, our use table doesn't allow multifamily as a use by right in the historic district at all, but it does allow mixed residential and commercial uses.
Right,
It states that ground floor residential is limited to an accessory use to a commercial use, so if you had your commercial storefront, then in the back of that storefront, you could have like a unit, and then above you could have a unit. So I guess what it's trying to avoid is taking a storefront and just converting it all to residential on the ground
That's
floor, but. I don't
but you
know.
could, well, then in that case, maybe it's already covered, maybe it's good.
I think so.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't, you wouldn't just add an X on the new line here. You could have like a mixed use efficiency dwelling unit as opposed to multiple family. But if it's already covered, then.
I think if you added an X, it would create a scenario where the ground floor.
Right, now, I'm not saying that, to be clear.
Yeah,
That's
no,
not what
I
I'm
hear
suggesting.
you.
Right,
Yeah, okay, so the definition though does not talk about anything with kitchen space. So, I keep thinking of those other places. So it just means it's a room, a
Well,
bathroom.
the definition does require space arranged for living, eating, and sleeping purposes, so
That doesn't
that's
mean,
quite open-ended. And then in that case, I think we would have to defer to building code, right, to say what an eating space has to entail.
I've lived in studio apartments, they don't normally have like a separate kitchen, it's more like.
no,
over this wall.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but I think if you're gonna leave it like this and it says eating, that to me, I wouldn't do a kitchen.
Well, I'm sorry, so it says dwelling unit, which is part of this definition, actually does define bathroom in separate quarters exclusive for living, cooking, and sanitary purposes. So I guess, are those combined together?
Yeah, all of it except for the bathroom is separate.
Right.
So the cooking is,
It does say kitchen though in the dwelling unit
That's the
definition.
dwelling unit.
And then this is dwelling
Efficiency
unit.
is what we're
But our
talking about.
definition.
I thought it was
to-
combined
to-
there.
Oh, I'm looking at the lower
Oh,
one.
So
right.
this is
This
the
would be a
current,
question for
we're talking
you.
about adding that.
To
No, I thought it was
Jefferson's
defined
points here,
Yeah,
since
no,
it says a
the
dwelling
definition
efficiency
focuses
unit is
on-
a dwelling unit containing these things except for these things.
I see you're saying.
Would we make the leap that
see, I'm looking
it
at the
has to
lower
have a
one.
kitchen?
Yeah, and I thought
It's
these were
considered
the combined
dwelling unit,
definition
except
here,
it's-
so I got it.
Two different things, yes.
It's a separate, definition. Yeah,
What
So,
is,
but it should be absorbed though, to Cindy's point, into the dwelling efficiency unit definition. Because there's nothing in there about a kitchen.
but yeah, that's the separation of what makes this efficiency unit, the efficiency unit.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but I think we're back to having to be careful with, okay, we're back to a hotel room.
Well, it wouldn't be you couldn't. When we were talking about this, you couldn't do a hotel room because of that floor space limitation. There's not many hotel rooms
That's what I was gonna
At
ask
least
next. How big is a
400 square
hotel
feet.
room? I bet there's some hotel rooms that are 400 square feet.
I think I was just talking to someone
Maybe like
about,
the Four Seasons, but for like, I feel like a standard, like, regular hotel room, 400 square feet is pretty big for a
I was-
hotel.
Oh, I was thinking it was small.
I was just talking to someone who was talking about the standards to build a hotel that's franchised. And they said that, there has to be a certain square footage. I think it's like 160 or something like that, but our building code would say for sleeping rooms, you're only allowed to have one person per 70 square feet, and then for each additional person, you have to add 50 square feet. So theoretically, a hotel room with an occupancy of 2 could probably be as little as 120 square feet.
So just for reference, 400 square feet is 20 by 20, which is roughly the size of this room. This room might be slightly bigger than that,
Okay,
very slightly.
okay, I was.
120 is 11 by 11.
Okay.
It's quite a bit smaller.
Google says, and you can always trust Google.
Yes.
The average size of a hotel room could vary depending on the hotel's room location and room type. A standard room in a mid-range hotel in the United States is typically around 325 square feet.
Oh, see, I wasn't confident. Okay.
That's
I'm confused now.
bigger than I thought actually as well. I know some of
That's
the
average,
ones in
too.
town, at one point had done an analysis of just going through like booking.com or whatever to see if I could figure out room sizes and whatnot for some of our hotels, and some of them are definitely smaller than that. Some are probably about 300, 350, but they're older and they're not.
They're 6'9" too, so I mean,
hotels. Yeah.
I believe we're below the average for the nation,
Yeah.
I would bet.
Right.
But largely, this seems great. We've been talking about it and nitpicking it, but largely it seems awesome, I think.
Yeah, the big question I thought might be relevant to chat about has been brought up, like what do we need to change anything regarding what needs to be provided in these units as far as eating is concerned?
To me, eating means you could have a microwave, hot plate, whatever. It doesn't mean you have a little table that you sit at. To me, that means eating. It doesn't mean,
Would you toss in
Dinner.
cooking as a word?
no, I'm just afraid we're putting ourselves out of the capability of doing this if we put in requiring, like we did in the extended stay, the stovetops and stuff like that. I think they're two different things.
I agree.
But, so I just want to be clear that to me, that does not include a kitchen at all.
In my experience in these type of spaces, you have a little more freedom to cook,
Have
to add in,
appliances, yeah.
pots and add in space for a kitchen space within your place than like in those extended stay
Yeah, no, I
type of
agree.
places.
And I used to live in a place like that where it was the living area, if you will, had a like kitchen, the counter, and then, yeah, there's the living room and then you put your bed and everything else there. So that's kind of what I was getting at with the definition of a kitchen, not that it's a separate or distinct room, but that it's more of a space, a cooking space, but.
Yeah, and that's not what we're
That's hard to
saying here.
define, yeah.
So what is this purpose? What does this do? You said for future building of what? It's
Well-
not the dormitory, it's not
Yeah, I mean,
the accessory dwelling unit.
it's if there was some sort of proposed development or conversion from an old hotel,
What I
this
see,
would be a path that
yeah,
isn't the slip through the cracks that's happening.
Okay,
yeah, what I see to answer that too is that in general, we're trying to address housing by allowing more housing. And this is a standard housing type that's not currently allowed here. And so it's about, seems to me that it's about allowing more housing without like accidentally, like you said, allowing stuff we don't want to happen.
And Cindy, with the kitchen talk, the definition says space arranged for living, eating, and sleeping purposes. I would probably argue that the difference here is I don't think a hotel room is really arranged for
Yeah.
eating purposes compared to.
Or even living,
But how
honestly.
specific do we have to be? Because it's hard for me to see, when we started this conversation about the situations that we have seen in the
extended
hotels.
stay.
It was like we were talking, well, people are living there.
Mhm.
We wanted to make sure they have access to like cooking options, not just a microwave. right? So I'm having a hard time understanding how this would not turn into that, which we just tried to get rid of.
Cause you couldn't just convert a hotel room into this, right? It would have to be this minimum square footage. It would have to have space arranged for living, eating and sleeping. The hotel room is really just designed for an overnight stay. And that I think is,
Yeah, but on this one wasn't, I thought it said something that it could just have a microwave. And we were talking before, like, no, it has to be some cooking options, like more than a microwave.
Communication Or.
Or a
Well,
community kitchen.
you're conflating definitely the extended stay and then like the concept of a studio apartment.
No, I mean, no, because we converted those into extended stay because it was, people were living in a studio apartment. Unless the studio apartment actually has access for cooking
yeah,
options.
that's what this, you know, it's
Well,
got.
That's what it,
They're
Okay.
living in a hotel room.
And
It's
I-
not a studio apartment. There's a pretty big
well, but if
difference.
it doesn't have a cooking option, that's what I'm trying to
It's a
say.
good point.
I
But-
think there's a potential other difference between our extended stay and what this might do is extended stay was essentially saying, hey, we have these hotel rooms that are being rented out long-term and we don't think it's safe, or maybe it's not safe, maybe it needs to be better regulated. So instead of making you go through and you're not allowed to rent out your hotel room for more than 30 days at a time. So the options are either you stop renting out your hotel rooms for more than 30 days at a time and you only rent them out for these short-term stays, or you get this license that allows you to, maybe you have to do some upgrades, one of which would be shared cooking kitchen facilities, but you don't have to go through a whole process, change of use necessarily to change your business model or what have you.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, like if you're saying, hey, let's say the example of, hey, I have a hotel, I no longer want to operate as a hotel, I just want to rent out studio apartments, we'd say, well, you could do the extended stay and you have to meet all those definitions of extended stay, or you could convert to efficiency units. Here's the minimum square footage, it's 400 square feet per unit. Also, because you're doing this change of use, you now have to meet building code for an efficiency dwelling unit, which is in building code. And so like, whereas the hotels still are classified as hotels, these now have to be upgraded to meet the requirements of building code to be considered an efficiency unit.
Or it could be new construction. I mean, switching from a hotel is not the only use.
Right.
So why don't we use the definition of the dwelling efficiency unit that's in the building code? Because then if it's the same and if it's applying towards whatever the kitchen space might be or how that word is used, because to me, this still does not say kitchen space. This is just telling me I can take my hotel and change everything to efficiency apartments, just the way it is. I don't have to put in a microwave, I don't have to, most places have, but you don't have to do anything other than that than meet
I disagree
the
with that.
square footage.
And one of the reasons that I disagree is that the electrical isn't set up for a kitchen for living in a hotel room. Plugging in a microwave and a hot plate and a bigger refrigerator, it's dangerous in a hotel room. It's
So
not set up for that.
this is saying that you can do it and change to doing it.
I disagree, but you know, we both have our opinions on that.
Or they're building it like that.
It-
Without the electrical.
And I seriously doubt there's any hotel here that has rooms that are 400 square feet or more, so I
Right.
there's.
Or even 350 if we lower it.
I guess I'd be curious to see what the building code's definition is.
And it's
This
on
guy
the topic
looking it up,
of the
he's
square
pretty quick
footage
on the
though.
computer.
And I know,
I
you know,
really
we just
looking it up.
use this definition because at least it was chosen at some point to be in the code.
No, I like it. I like the idea. I like the intent of where we're going here. I just see a loophole with the eating. Is all. I think anything that we can allow. I mean, just like you're asking about moving forward with some of the dormitory and stuff like that. Yes, it's all stuff we need to do.
Well, I just pulled this up, I had been emailing back and forth with our building official from Safe Built, and she had mentioned, and you know, maybe the direction from tonight, because it's just a work session item tonight, so maybe the direction is to look more into what would the building code requirements be for
That
meeting
definition.
space, square footage, things like that. She had written, and so I'll have to make sure that this is correct, but she said the 2018 IPMC has been adopted in Idaho Springs, which has provisions to enforce requirements for a dwelling unit or sleeping unit. If these are being used as dwelling units, then there are minimum requirements for permanent means for cooking facilities, sanitation, and habitable sleeping space. So it
Permanent
seems
means
from
of
her
cooking.
that she's talking about permanent, and that could just be like a fixed hot plate, maybe, I don't really know, but that gets a little.
Still sounds okay to me. I mean, if it's permanent, it's gotta be
So-
safe.
So like, I think maybe the direction would be like, our definition maybe is good because we have to apply it to do it. The building code anyway, and that's gonna require permanent cooking facilities, then do we wanna put that in, or can we just kind of defer to building code? Or do we want to change our current definition as well as adding it as a use? Because all this is doing right now is adding the existing definition to the use by right table.
Mhm.
Well, I'm still for it. I mean, if you're worried about that type of thing, it does seem like something that could be addressed afterwards.
Yeah, but I think it's a little misleading to the person if they're to pick up the code book and not realize, oh, I better look at the building codes.
You
Kinda
have
like
to look
fire-
at the 80 different
I know,
codes.
I'm just saying, I can just see all of a sudden somebody going through it and going, oh, now I gotta have a permanent cooking or whatever it says.
To be fair though, like to argue against that, every person that is developing in the city has to look
Has
at
to
the
look
building
at the
code,
building
and it's
code.
not like we're saying for a dwelling unit, look at the building code.
And I mean, I've done development in the city, had a great time working on it, doing it. It was very minor, but even for my very minor thing, had to look in all sorts of different parts of the code. I mean, it's just how it is. If we want to do a comprehensive code review so that you only have to look in one place, that's for various generic projects, including this. It's a huge, huge task, and it's not very standard in other cities. Like, it's an unfortunate reality, I think, that like sometimes you gotta look in a couple places in a big log document if you're gonna do development. I really don't think that should stop us from adopting this or recommending it tonight or whatever.
Dylan, we're also supposed to be looking into exploring also like, minimum, areas and all that stuff into about the code and development for like housing options, right? Like, so.
Yeah.
I guess this could be also be part of the conversation and kind of make a decision then if we actually need an ordinance specific for it.
Yeah, I think if we want to continue, we could just, as opposed to moving this forward, the alternative would be, let's just add in these other elements that we've talked about of like assessing where we can add, those kind of like easy ways to add density by increasing ADUs and stuff like that. And finding spaces where you could
Loosen the
Things you-
code and all that.
What I would be worried about on doing that is if we package this with other recommendations with ADUs and square footage and other stuff, if someone on council doesn't like one little thing, the whole thing gets stalled. All of the other stuff gets stalled. If we keep them separate, if they don't like one thing, only that one thing gets stalled.
But we could also decide to like, my thought is like in the process of learning all these things and looking at other different options, maybe we find that this fits with something else. Or maybe, like you said, when we're like, yo, actually, no, this has to stay by itself. And we're like, we'll do this package over here with this things. And this one is gonna be the ordinance that we looked at a month ago, or whatever. So.
Possibly.
The other thing we had briefly discussed, I guess it would have been December, is with the comprehensive plan meeting to get done in 2025. One of those major elements is housing broadly, and we're starting the multi-jurisdictional housing authority at some, this year, because that was approved. So potentially not adopting any major changes until we get through that process, which maybe is not maybe there's some things we talked about last time, there's some things that are high priorities that we'd like to be working on in the interim. So then the question would be, is this part of the couple of things that we wanted to work on as high priorities, or is it part of maybe we address it as part of the like comp plan process to determine what works for the community. Because the other thing I will say with this is anything that's not currently allowed per code could be approved as a conditional use permit. So theoretically, I guess someone could come in and say, hey, I want to do dwelling efficiency units. I see they're not approved. They're not allowed anywhere in the code, but I still want to do it. I'm going to apply for a CUP as like a permanent use in R3 or what have you. So we could go through it that way. It would obviously make the process much longer as opposed to just having to get like a final development plan. But it would be, I guess there is theoretically a avenue now. It's just a more difficult, time consuming avenue. So if ultimately direction is let's hold off on this until we have some of those other details, then we can kind of do it all together. Then that would be the saving grace, if you will. And then the CUP process would allow kind of everything to be considered, you know, because you kind of sift through every aspect of that development as opposed to saying, well, it's used by right. So it's a much more lenient.
I like that because when you read through your thing, you talk about the 400 square feet, but then we're seeing Summit County's allowing 350. So it might be something we want to be considering to make it more user friendly. If you're saying this 400 is so big, and then when you read down farther, when you're talking the other size units, and then it being able to include
Right, yeah, so.
future development, whether it's dorm style living and stuff, because we have been approached on stuff like that.
I'm certainly for,
Yeah.
checking out the square footage requirements and likely reducing them.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm curious why that should block what we're talking about tonight. Like, we're just talking about taking this definition that already exists and saying it's allowed in these zones. And then we could easily at the very next meeting even talk about.
Well,
square
our
footage
code
requirements.
would say 400,
Right, and so then
Yeah.
that might
because
also
the
be,
building code says it already.
if
So
we-
if we pass an ordinance that says something different, then it could be different.
if we were, I guess
Right.
the other consideration, I would say is if you decide to say, hey, let's go forward with this, and I'll get it as a regular meeting action item in March, then if we then opened up the discussion for, hey, we want to consider whether everything is the correct size and also consider potential upzonings or here, or allowing ADUs to be more flexible here, like that could be the next suite of things, which then would amend the allowances for these efficiency units then, because I think one of the things that would be really low hanging fruit would be a requirement that a single family home be 800 square feet. Whereas like someone might say, hey, I only have a quarter acre lot or a tenth of an acre lot, I want to do 600 square feet. Right now, you'd have to get variance to do so, and really what's the harm of allowing smaller homes? As long as they have everything you need for a single family.
And that's kind of my point on it not blocking this, is it does seem that we need to address those square footage requirements kind of all over the place. So I don't know, we could let that block this or not. I mean, it just seems why not let this go through?
We can also hold it, not block it.
Well, whatever, delay it, whatever word you want to use. I don't know.
I think what I'd like direction wise is, do we want to put this as a regular meeting item for March? And if we do, are there any things that you'd like to see considered more before it gets on the agenda? Or do we want to kind of hold off until I bring more information back on a few items? Like you kind of talked about square footages and opening up housing codes a little bit more.
I
How
think we
much
can,
longer would that be?
Good question.
I think if we do door one, we would come back with this as a regular meeting item to vote on. And what we would probably come back with in terms of changes is nothing. We would come with more information about what this would look like, right? In theory, in practice, following the building codes. And if that's what you're comfortable with, then you take a vote on this and approve or deny.
And maybe also in March, do a work session on these secondary things, if it would be possible to have it ready by then.
I
That
think
was
I
my
could,
question.
I might not have it so fleshed out that it would have, you know, like pages and pages of
By
research
March, yeah.
in, just because, you know, I want to start on the complaint stuff and things like that, so it might, I don't think by March we'd have it at a point where we'd have like a draft ordinance ready, but I could certainly have it as a work session item and have as much detail as possible.
Just start the discussion.
We could come back in March for sure though and say, look, this is what a multiple family efficiency dwelling unit fully built out would look like and what it would.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of looking about, if we're gonna look at like smaller options, I feel like it's relevant to like look at all the smaller options in a way.
And you might come back with this and think, okay, at the next one, no, let's wait and get more at that point, not really in a way doing both. Come back with it for the next one with clarification on this dwelling efficiency, using the word eating and looking at what the building code says and the square footage. But you might come back and say, you know, I really think we should look at the 350, not the 400, and say, let's wait till the following month when I bring more together. So we could have either or option, whatever. I mean, you might dig into this and feel that, okay, there's more options out there that we should discuss than just kind of pushing this one through right now.
Maybe, I don't.
Maybe is right.
I don't, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, it seems like they felt like it was worth bringing to us
Yeah,
tonight.
we took this because, you
Yeah,
know,
but they
we,
didn't even know the building code. They had to look
That's
it
not
up.
true, they did, but do you have it memorized, Cindy?
Oh,
They looked
God.
it up and answered it tonight.
Yeah,
Nick looked it up and answered it.
we had,
He already answered that
we
question
had a
tonight.
few work sessions on this. We felt that you guys wanted to see something.
we do.
So this is what we brought you, a small baby step forward that we.
It can be amended.
Absolutely, it can be amended, it's a good,
Well, we're not deciding on it tonight anyways.
no, we're deciding if
Be
we want.
amended at the next, when he brings it back. And that's what I said, bring it back and we can decide at
To the
that
regular
point.
meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, great.
Yeah, and
Then
he
we're in
can-
agreement. That's.
Yeah, and
that's
then,
what I'm saying
at that point, he might say, no, I don't think this is good. She may have researched more thinking no, and you might say, I really think we should wait. So,
Is it, so it sounds like we're all kind of in agreement that it basically as written should be at our regular
I
meeting
would not
next time,
vote
is
on
that
it right
correct?
now as written, so,
So why do you want it to come back as a regular item next? meeting?
because they can
Well,
research the word eating more.
It sounds
Right now, to
like-
me, that tells me not
It
very
sounds
good.
like my direction is to look into building code and determine that for an efficiency for studio apartment that would broadly meet this definition, what does it actually mean to
Exactly.
entail? And if it,
Instead of us
and if
guessing.
the current definition in our code covers what, well, then I can report back and say, this is what would be like, if a safe building official was reviewing these plans, coming into a unit to approve this dwelling efficiency unit, this is what it would have to look like.
Yeah.
And if this definition meets that, then
Good.
it's
Mhm.
perhaps good, and then it'll be built on when we dig into the other stuff, and if we determine in the next 3 weeks that it's not sufficient as written, and it would leave too many loopholes to just be able to, you know, plug a microwave in, then we'd say, all right, are we as a board okay with that, or do we want it to be a permanent fix, something, or yeah, right, so then at least we know what because if the building code says, hey, you have to have permanent fixed thing, stovetop or a fixed top plate or whatever, then it answers the question for us. If building code does not require that,
Then we
then
can do that.
the question is, do we want to require it, I think, and so that'll be what's on the agenda for next month on this particular issue. And I would say the next month, actually, it would be March. We need to talk about the next, if we're having this training on the fifth. I think that's probably gonna be 60, 90 minutes, something like that potentially. So I don't know really if we wanna add a bunch of.
I think if we look and it's clear that someone that's in one of these can get an oven and a microwave set up and that works perfectly fine in the unit, then we're good to go. And there shouldn't be too much further discussion beyond that. So,
We could probably address it pretty quickly based on your findings.
yeah, so.
I'm sorry, just to add, you're talking about for safe built, you said that they have examples of what they would technically approve?
I don't think they have an example as far as like a
Yeah,
floor plan,
drawing,
but we could
something.
probably. I would guess,
Help anybody?
I'm not necessarily committing Safe Built to being willing to review drawings with me or something like that, or create them per se, but if they have them, I think I will be able to get enough guidance to be able to show a space that would be approved with the definition.
Or even just a description. Maybe you have to do a drawing.
Because your example
Sure.
tonight of, hey, this is the size of this, great, it's a visual, that helps out, I think, everybody a lot.
I can do that, and then would we want to have in March the discussion on these other things that we talked about, like potentially reducing the sizes in our use table and perhaps starting to talk more detail on like ADUs and potentially allowing like, higher
It'll
densities.
be that in the training, right?
Well, that was kind of what I was getting at. The training will be.
The
kind
training
of
might
long.
take, I mean,
And so then
it's
my
tough to say
question might
how many
be-
questions we'll get.
And so maybe the question might be, should we make the training a standalone night and preserve our work session, or?
I'd be okay with that. But
It's
what
up
do y'all
to you
think?
guys, I mean, if you wanna do the training and then just put this on the agenda for March and that's it, then we can do that, or we can move the training around and add more stuff to the first Wednesday in March.
Cause I anticipate if we do the training and we potentially have a regular meeting item to address, like we could set it up where we do the training, we have our work session, and then we have regular meeting like council has it. And we could say, training starts at like work session starts at 6 or starts at 5:30. Council meeting starts at 7:30 or whatever. Regular meeting starts at 7:30. And we'll have the regular meeting and maybe we won't actually take action on this, but we'll at least have it set up, and then maybe it's a late night, which we often have planning commission, which is fine, but I'm just anticipating if we have a work session item about this and the training and regular meeting, that it will be quite a late night.
Well, let's not do that to everybody. I don't know. We're having another one in April, right?
Yeah.
I don't see the training taking that long, but
I've had short ones and I've had long ones, it's really just depending on
how many new people?
how deep in the weeds with the questions we get.
Well, it'll be us, right?
It depends on us,
Well, you
how
know
much we
us.
talk about.
No, I think last time we did it went really quick.
But it's not just you guys too,
Yeah,
it's
that's what I
every
mean.
other,
Oh, you're joining.
Depends-
it's everyone.
Point.
It's gonna be
Depends
a
on new
big
people.
classroom, so,
Right.
And we were talking about bringing dinner, which might just be burgers or something.
I would just say there's sort of pieces all night.
Well, I would say do the
You do it.
training and do a work session.
Yeah, we can always just.
Unless you have
take
something
action.
present where you need the agenda, because if we do the work session on talking about the thing we're doing now, and then if, bam, you'd be ready to go for the April meeting
Yeah.
and make a
I mean,
decision.
this isn't urgent. It's just the only reason I was pushing this is easy and it's right in front of us.
we're gonna bring this back for the regular meeting though, if we.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can do the work session on it after the training meeting.
Yeah, and then all the other stuff we hold till April.
Yeah.
Or we,
That makes sense.
Well, it depends. He might have some ideas that might go with it. Who
Okay.
knows?
so maybe you just wanna leave it up to
Dylan,
Dylan to decide.
The last thing I will say, and then I think we can all get out of here, because I have good direction. But I'm just trying to schedule things while we have everyone here, is I have a feeling we will have a regular meeting item for March.
okay.
And so, which will not necessarily come from the city. So I have a feeling they'll be ready to go in March on a land use application from a private citizen. And so we probably need to have a regular meeting in March. And so I could schedule it as a special meeting and have a special regular meeting in March. And we could do our work session for our normal one to have this training, or we could schedule a special training another day.
I think we should have the training one day and the work and the regular meeting another day. In March, is that okay with everybody?
My only add, I'll say, is
Uh-huh.
if you put the training before the meeting and the meeting starts at X time.
No, I'm saying separate them.
No, I know, I'm saying if you put them together though, at
Okay.
least there's a set time the training has to end, so you're not going in
That is a good
circles.
point. I like that.
Yeah, I like that
Do you
too.
like that?
I personally like that, because I don't.
Okay, here's an
Schedule
open
it for-
question. How many people could be here by 5:30? That could make a difference.
5:35.
I know, you're,
Yeah, that's true.
That's right.
If we could say
because that could
work
help that
session
half hour.
starts at 5:30, regular meeting will definitely start at 7, like a normal council meeting would. But city council, then it caps the whole work session at an hour and a half. And you know, maybe the training takes 60 minutes, maybe it takes less, maybe it takes a little more, and then we have, you know, maybe another half hour, another 20 minutes, whatever, to chat housing stuff.
Get to know each other.
Sure.
And then the regular meeting will, you know, has a pretty set time
Okay.
frame.
So we're doing the training session at 5:30. I think the regular meeting's 6:30. Nick just can't talk that much.
This,
And then we go into the work session, because if it's one item, it's approving the minutes again in one item.
Well,
Well,
Maybe two.
well, it could also be
I thought he
this.
said one.
it'd be this and the.
yeah, I think the thought would be that we
No, I
wanna
understand.
chat housing before the regular meeting, cause
That's-
if
I
we
do
get to a point that we want to recommend this or a slightly revised version of this on its own, that we'd have the ability to do so. So maybe we would say the training goes 5:30 to 6:30, and 6:30 it's drop dead for the
Mhm.
training. If people have questions, they'll just have to
Go in
ask
the
them
other
some
room.
time. And then we have our work session to talk housing stuff, then 7 o'clock, regular meeting starts, we're done well before 8 probably still.
Sweet.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay, well, thanks for taking a couple minutes to talk through that.
Look at us.
It's complicated
We did it.
sometimes.
Now you just gotta get everybody else to agree to 5:30.
I'm blaming you if they get it.
Well, HPRC typically starts at 5:30, so variance board starts as needed. And sites and facilities starts at 9 AM on a Monday morning, so.
I think they'll like earlier.
Yeah, 5:30 might work.
Sites facility.
Sure.
And then we got the business and community promotion board.
And we will have a hybrid option, so people, if they don't wanna come into this room and eat pizza, they can just listen in while doing the dishes or whatever.
Pizza, doing dishes.
You're looking at me, is that, are you trying to tell me something?
Oh,
I don't have that many dishes.
Something else, I'm just saying that if you don't want
Do you
to,
guys want these?
you can listen in while doing whatever. No, fantastic, well, that's good direction, I'm
Awesome.
with that.
Do you want?
Some salad.
Are we adjourned?
Are we adjourned, Cindy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
All right,
We were-
sweet.
Yeah.
One thing I'd love to say before we go, if anyone's interested in seeing the new apartments that are behind the Catholic Church, there's an open house tomorrow, 5 and 5:30.
Good point, I forgot to mention that for the habitat houses, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go over right at 5.
It's a dedication of, it's a dedication of the first few units that have been completed. I think they're ready for occupancy, so.